Hey, good morning, Susie. Welcome. Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning. We'll get started in just a little bit. I've got a little bit more setup to do, but I'll say good morning to welcome to Susie again from the great state of Minnesota. Welcome to Beth Works, and good morning to Stephen Armstrong. Good to see Stephen as well, and good morning to Osman from the great country of Turkey. And good morning to Mindy as well. And Mindy, thank you so much for the beautiful Christmas card you sent from Nevada. Um, it's always a special treat to get something in the mail unexpectedly, other than a bill. Uh, and uh, and I appreciate that those thoughtful words that you wrote in the card as well. Um, and also a thank you to Susie. Susie sent me a box that I haven't opened yet, but I'm guessing there's all kinds of goodies in there. And good morning to Emma as well. Emma is at work today, but as she catches little gap points in the pharmacy, she uh, she pops on and listens with her earbuds so she can still take care of her duties as a pharmacist. Yeah. So we'll get started in just a little bit, you guys. Just ask for your patience as I get some additional setup. And I don't know if you can hear the music. I don't have it playing right now, but I'll put on some music. If you can't hear it, then you can turn on Christmas music at your place and fill that gap. Still trying to figure this Razor camera out. It seems to be the secret is buying one of Razor's audio mixers and then connecting that audio mixer to the camera and adjusting stuff with that. So I'm kind of looking at that as an option. Unfortunately, they're not real cheap. They're about $200. So they sell you an expensive camera that's almost $200, and then they want you to buy the audio mixer. So by the time you get done, you've spent almost 500 bucks to do live streaming. Kind of crazy, but it is what it is. It's the cost of doing business, right? and welcome to Candido Rivera. Candido Rivera. I'm curious, can you guys let me know? I'm curious if you can let me know, are you able to hear any music at all? Not right now. I'll go ahead and turn it back on. Tell me if you can hear the music, if you would, please. Well, thank you everyone for your patience as I was kind of getting additional things set up here. Um, I'm going to leave the music off because it sounds like we're still battling that audio issue with the music and me talking at the same time. Would you let me know how is the audio quality right now and hearing me? Because I'm going to be giving you a lot of pointers on diagnosing a dead featherweight motor. Susie sent me some of my favorite things. I'm excited to open that box. I haven't done it yet, but I certainly will. And you're very welcome, Candido. I'm glad that. Okay, good. Sound is good. I'm glad that you feel welcome. My goal, and certainly the moderator's goals as well, Emma and Susie, and certainly others that serve in that role, we want you to feel welcome. We want you to feel like you're a part of the family and that you can relax and learn and also share your knowledge as well. This is not all about me imparting my wisdom. I certainly have wisdom to share, but it's also learning from each other. So I want to make that really clear. Don't be shy to step forward into the live chat. And if you have some insights, by all means, share your insights. We love to learn from each other. So that's really cool. All right. So I got a featherweight in. I'm going to kind of move the camera just a little bit. Got this featherweight in, and the customer told me straight away that there's an issue with the motor. There's an issue with the motor, and so I wanted to kind of allow you to kind of take a journey with me as I try to figure out what the issue is. And hopefully it'll prove helpful to you if you have motor issues, not only on a featherweight, but on any sewing machine. A lot of the things we're going to cover during this live stream today should be helpful to you if you are diagnosing a motor issue on any machine. Doesn't matter if it's a Singer machine, it could be domestic, it could be a FOF machine, it could be a light industrial machine. the basic motor components in an electric motor are going to be pretty static as you move from one motor to another. You know, the basic components of the stack lamentations, the stator, the commutator, and a lot of the other electrical components that we're going to look at are going to be very, very similar in other electric motors. The only cautionary note that I'd like to give you is that since we're going to be working with electricity, this is not something I'm necessarily encouraging you to try. I'm simply sharing information because not everybody is comfortable working with electric motors. Not everyone is comfortable working with electric motors. And so it really is going to be at your discretion, depending on how comfortable you are in taking something like this on. Okay, let me set the camera down before I disconnect this. Just going to get that cord out a little bit. All right, hopefully you can see things pretty well. So the first thing I wanted to show you is if a motor is taken out of a machine, and many of you have already seen me do this on other live streams, but if a motor is taken out of a machine, you can still test it to see whether or not you're getting a proper response from electrifying the motor. So let me show you how to do that first of all. And this may be real basic to some of you. For others, this may be revolutionary. You didn't know you could do it. You know, if you have a machine that isn't mounted in a featherweight and isn't connected to a foot controller, you may not have known that you can do a bypass. And I use a bypass system of using alligator clips. I wanted to first of all show you what is a healthy motor response to that test. And then we're going to test this motor over here that came with a featherweight that's on the workbench right now. And we'll be able to slowly but surely, hopefully, go through a journey through this troubled motor and pinpoint what the issue is. That's our goal. So I'm going to set this to the side right now because we're not going to focus on the foot controller right now. Set it all the way over there. So to do a bypass on a motor, you've obviously got a positive and negative connection that normally would be mounted to something like this on a featherweight machine. This one is obviously damaged, but this would be the part that would be pointing out and that you would connect your plug to, and that's how you would normally power your machine. On the back of there, if you didn't know it, there are three zones on the back of a typical connection for a Singer machine, not just a featherweight, but it's true of other Singer machines as well. You've got zone 1, 2, and 3. 3 is going to be the one that's in red. Generally, the connection points on here for a standard setup is going to be on 3. You're going to connect your light. And then between zones 1 and 3, you'll split that between your foot controller and your motor. With the current connection setup that I have on this one, I'll just show this to you again. The current setup on this connection right here, we don't have to worry about the splitting really because it's already been done for us. The foot controller is already wired into the power cord, and all we do is plug it in, and it's plug and play. We're ready to go. But on other machines, you've got to do that work that's already been done for you here. So when you have to do that work and you don't have basically a 2-ply type setup, you've got to do it yourself. So in that instance, again, the light goes on 1 and 3, and then you can set up the motor typically on 1 and 2, and then you set up the foot controller on 2 and 3. Let me say that again. So again, when you're looking at a manual setup on a machine like this, 1 and 3 is going to be your hot point for the light so that you have continuous power. And then for intermittent power, you split your setup between the motor and the foot controller. You can set up the motor, say, on 1 and 2, and then you'll set up the foot controller on 2 and 3. That way, when you press the foot controller, it completes that circuit and it powers your motor. You don't want to ever set up the motor on 1 and 3, because then when you plug that in, it's going to start running continuously. The same thing can happen as far as continuous running of a motor if your resistor or your capacitor fail. Typically, the resistor failing, when you plug it in, that motor will run continuously. So hopefully that makes sense. But again, I just wanted to show you the back of this. A lot of featherweight owners will only look at this side. They'll plug their power cord in with that 2-ply setup. They'll hit that foot controller, and the motor should spin up straight away. But if you have to set it up yourself, you need to understand how these zones work so that you set it up for success. So if you need to hear that again, you can rewind it. I won't say it again. So first of all, we've got what I know is a healthy motor. At least I hope it's a healthy motor. So I've got these alligator clips that are real helpful. Most of you have probably seen these before. And we're going to connect these to this lead so we can see if we can get this motor to fire up. And again, you always want to be real careful whenever you're working with electricity, right? You always want to be really, really careful. And again, if you don't have a comfort zone in working with this, then don't do it. Definitely don't do it. And what I'm going to do is glass is not a conductor of electricity. So I'm going to put this glass bottle with my cleaning concoction in between so that these two don't touch. Otherwise, we'll have a 4th of July thing going on. I'm going to shut the heater off just temporarily. So we've got a real quiet workshop. And I'm going to try to plug this in. So we're getting a good response from the motor. It's firing up beautifully. Hopefully you can kind of hear that. Nice and smooth, nice even running on the motor as well. This is the way a featherweight motor should be running. Yeah, that sounds really good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to test this motor that came with this featherweight in the workshop and see what kind of response we get from that. So I've got our number 1 motor right over here. Just kind of set it over there. Now we're going to bring our other motor into the picture. And by all appearance, it looks like a good motor, doesn't it? It's clean on the outside overall. It looks really, really nice. But there's some sort of an issue going on with it, because I can tell you that when I tested it off camera, we're not getting any response with this bypass, which is telling me we have a major issue going on with the motor. Let's go ahead and plug this in. Let's see if anything happens. Maybe somehow when I stepped away from this, we have a little bit of magic going on, and maybe something positive happened with it. But I'm not counting on it. Let's see what happens. So I've got it. Try to bring this cord around. I've got the bypass right now connected. I've got it plugged in over here. And we're not getting anything. We're not getting anything. Now, maybe my alligator clips are somehow defective, or there's an issue with those. Let's get the electrical tester to see if we have electricity coming to those. So this is a voltage checker right here. If you've never seen one of these, it's a voltage detector. Kind of bring that into the shot. And it's designed strictly to determine whether or not there's an electrical presence. So come over here. So we have electricity coming to the bypass, but the motor, I'm going to shut that off. That's annoying after a while. the motor is not responding in any way. We got a good response from the other motor, but we're not getting any response from this one. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this. Slide that over to the side. Yep. Almost dropped it. That's not good. So this is our troubled motor. I'm going to set it to the side again. We're just going to test it one more time with the good motor just to see if we get a positive response. Go and split those leads right there. And yes, I have it unplugged right now. You don't want to be doing this with it plugged in unless you're really, really adventurous or borderline foolish. So, okay, we'll keep those apart. So we know that our bypass is working properly. We know that we've got one motor that's working correctly, one that's not. So let's try to figure things out a little bit. Let me go ahead and move the good motor to the back. Move this good motor over here, and this bad motor we're going to bring over here. Now, you always start with the basics when you're troubleshooting a motor. And the basics are, will the output pulley turn? Sometimes when a motor is taken apart, people will tighten these screws on this, and they end up creating a problem with it not being able to turn because it's basically compressing against that output pulley, and then as a result, the output pulley won't turn. This one, I can tell you, the output pulley is turning just fine. I can move it back and forth. It is moving. The next thing we want to check, and again, just with the real basics, is does the motor have motor brushes? If the motor doesn't have motor brushes, then we can do all kinds of cleaning and diagnosing. I'm going to turn my heater back on. We can do all kinds of cleaning and diagnosing, and it's not going to matter. So these, if you didn't know, you've got one on the top and one on the bottom on your featherweight motor. And this is where your motor brushes are housed. So we're going to go ahead and open that up next and make sure that we have motor brushes in there. That's what a motor brush looks like if you've never seen one before. And basically, they're made out of carbon. They're a carbon stack, and motor brushes are all unique to the motor. In other words, the dimensions are going to be different on the motor brushes. And we can check this using a mechanical caliper to see if this is the correct size motor brush for a featherweight 221 or a featherweight 222 for that matter. Let's take the other motor brush out as well. Okay, so we've got both motor brushes out. Let's go ahead and measure these to see if it's correct. And the motor I'm working with is US rated. In other words, it's going to be a 0.4 amp motor. You can see that, I think, maybe on the nomenclature plate. And it is wired for 110, really you can just say between 110 to 125 volts. So if you were using this over in Europe, say in England or Ireland or anywhere else in the European market, you would need to have a step down converter that would take the voltage over there that's going to be between 220 to 250 and step it down to the voltage that this motor is compatible with. If you try to plug a motor like this into a an outlet over in the European marketplace, you're going to burn out this motor because it's not rated for that. They do have motors as well that are set up for 220 to 250, but always take that into account. If you're using anything electrical somewhere else in the world, you've got to look at that voltage before you plug it in. When I first arrived in Germany, I was about as green as a tomato, and I made the mistake. I decided as I was unpacking my things that I wanted to enjoy some music, even if it was German music. And so I went to plug my my radio into the outlet, and I had a little adapter on the end of it so that I could plug it into the outlet there. And I turned it on, and I heard just a brief microsecond of what sounded like music, and then it did a zip, and my radio was fried because I plugged a 120 to 120, 110 to 125 radio into a 250 outlet in Germany. So you learn real quick. So let's first of all do a general inspection of our motor brushes. They look like they're in generally good shape. In order to have a functional motor brush, it has to be about 5 millimeters long. That's the minimum. So let's see if we're making the minimum. We definitely are. We're about close to 11 to 12 millimeters long. So our carbon stack is long enough. Our brushes are the appropriate length. The other thing that can come into play sometimes with a motor not working correctly is the over time, these copper motor brushes can get compressed, kind of like that. They can get compressed, and they don't create enough pressure down to make good contact with the commutator. So we always have to look at that factor. Are the motor brushes compressed, and do we need to stretch them out a little bit so that they're going to be pushing that carbon stack down with enough force against the commutator to make a good electrical completion on that motorcycle? These look like they're fine. They look like they're more than adequate to give us a good response. The brushes are in good condition. Now we have to measure the size of them. Give me 1 second here. So now we're going to measure the size of these brushes. And it looks like on one side, we're right around 5.5. You can see that in the shot, I think. Right around 5.5 millimeters. We'll kind of rotate it. Right around 5.5. And for most featherweight motors, not all featherweight motors, for most featherweight motors, that's going to be the appropriate size for the carbon stack. So 5.5 by 5.5. There are exceptions to that, but generally the rule is when you slide this into that, copper sleeve, you should be able to feel that there's not excessive movement from either side as it's in that carbon sleeve. The carbon sleeve I'm referring to is this right here. When we slide that in there, it should fit in there, snug, but not tight. And the reason you don't want it tight is as that carbon is consumed by the motor, as it's running over the commutator, it's going to be consuming this carbon. It actually eats it up. So we want it to be snug, but not overly tight, so that it will, as it's consumed, it will incrementally work its way down further and further and further and further and further and further as it's continuing to make contact with that commutator. So from all appearances, these appear to be good brushes. Actually, I didn't check the other one. I should do that. I'm looking at them visually. So this is 5.5, 5.5 by 5.5 as we're using our mechanical caliper. Just verify it one more time. Yep. So both of these brushes are the correct size. The springs that maintain a downward tension as it's running over that commutator, this spring with that cap on top is going to be pushing this down against that commutator, which is represented by my finger. It's really dirty. It's going to be creating a downward pressure down to allow that to feed against the commutator. Okay? And hopefully I'm not getting too technical. I'm trying to keep it real basic. Trying to keep it real basic. So what if we want to dig into this motor and do a general inspection of it? Is that something we can do? Of course it is. But again, you want to do it based on your comfort level. Based on your comfort level. If you're not comfortable taking a motor apart, then don't take it apart. And on this particular motor, they're all going to be a little bit different. I'll show you the good motor first. So as you look at these two motors, they're both featherweight motors. But on this one, we've got the bolts that are clearly visible. If I adjust my camera shot. On this one, we've got bolts that are clearly visible. You can see one right there and one right there. And that's what we have to loosen on this good motor if we were wanting to go inside of that. But we're going to be dealing with a slightly different style motor where those bolts are actually recessed into these holes. It almost looks like there's no bolt in there, but there is a bolt in there, and we have to take those out so we can separate these two halves very carefully and see if we can look inside of this motor to see if we can do a little bit more diagnosing. And we'll also do some cleaning on it as well. So let me get an appropriate screwdriver to see if I can open that up. You generally don't want to be using a power screwdriver. It is a lot more efficient. Something like this. You don't want to be using something like this on a motor because, again, the risk is you'll tighten, when we put this back together, we'll tighten it too much, and the result will be that we'll end up binding the motor so that output pulley doesn't turn. So I like using a mechanical screwdriver, a standard screwdriver, to take the motor apart and also to put it back together. Some of you might disagree with that, but that's okay. So I'm loosening these up so we can hopefully pull this housing apart. And again, it never hurts to have a a magnetic tray nearby so that you can keep all of your parts together so you don't lose anything. So again, our goal is we want to see if we can separate this housing and see if we can pinpoint where the issue might be. And that's what the bolts look like then when we take them apart. You see that right there. And I can see just a little bit of varnishing and maybe even a little bit of a presence of rust on these bolts, which could be an indication that there's rust on the inside of this motor as well. So we'll have to take a close look at that. And when you're pulling a motor housing apart like this, you want to be really, really careful. I'll tell you why you want to be careful, because there are wires in here that are connecting. What I'm doing is I'm kind of extending this insulation sleeve just a little bit so I can have a little bit more play with these wires. But there's two wires that are connected in here. They're going to be connected from the stators to the commutator. And so as you're separating the housing on here, you don't want to yank it apart. You want to pull it apart real slowly and kind of feed this wire back into the motor to allow you to separate the two halves without putting excessive stress on the wires. So I'm going to start feeding that wire back in. Pull that part apart a little bit right there. So I'm going to give you kind of a glimpse inside of the motor from the side like that. Let me angle the camera a little bit better. So as we're kind of looking at the inside of this, you can see those two wires right here. think you can see those two wires. See one wire right there. And there's a wire on the other side, and they're coming off the top of the stators. This is the stator right here. Coming off the top of the stators, and then they're connecting to the copper ports that allow those motor brushes to be housed in there. So you're basically taking the electrical field and you're running it from the stator into the commutator. This is our commutator right here, which would be making contact with those motor brushes. I'm already seeing an issue with the commutator. I don't know if you can see that or not. The commutator should be a beautiful, bright copper type appearance. And I can see that it's very, very filthy right now. We got a lot of buildup on there right now. That's what all that junk on there. So that's one of the areas that we're going to service straight away once we do a general inspection of the wiring and make sure that the wiring is good as well. The wiring has to be solid coming off of the stators, feeding to those commutator ports where those motor brushes are. Otherwise, it's not going to complete the electrical cycle, and we're not going to get a good response from the motor. So let's take a look at that first of all. See if we can take this motor a little bit more apart. And again, you just don't want to be stressing the wires too much. You want to try to reduce the stress on those motor wires. Let's see if I can lift it like this a little bit. And there's also going to be washers on these as well. So you want to be real mindful of the washers that are on these also. Give you a different viewpoint here where you can look inside of the motor, see the wires coming off of the commutator, and then the wires will feed from the commutator into this area of the motor right here, which is called the stacked lamentations. It's all part of the electrical field. And that also looks like it could use a little bit of tidying up as well. But my main concern right now is the appearance of that commutator, which appears to be very, very contaminated with a combination of carbon and maybe something else. So we're going to be focusing on that significantly to see if we can figure out what's going on with that area of the motor. And again, I'm just trying to be real gentle with these wires. I don't want to break these wires. Otherwise, we're going to be doing soldering on top of everything else. I'm going to do one other thing real quick. I'd like to be able to take this entire assembly out so we can inspect it, but I've got to take out my motor pulley assembly first to free it up, because right now it's binding. See if we can get in there with an appropriate screwdriver and take this little output pulley off. That's going to be a little bit too big. Let's see if this screw will be the right size. Should be only one set screw on there. One right there. That should be able to come off now. Let's see if it will. It's stuck on there pretty good. Let's see if we can get this end out. That's going to be a little bit too wide. That's not coming off for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why. I'll have to take a look at that because this is the only screw that holds it on. And we should be able to pull that off straight away, but it's not coming off. It seems to be binding in there. Yeah, that's binding on there. Take this all the way out. You normally don't have to take this set screw all the way out. And this one only has one set screw that's holding this motor output pulley on. So you see how long that is. And then what it does is it bites down on the shaft itself to hold that motor pulley output on. Finally, we got it off. It sometimes takes a little bit of patience to get that off. Now we should be able to hopefully remove this entire assembly on here. The other thing you want to be careful of is there are going to be spacer washers. Let me grab my magnet. There are going to be spacer washers on both ends of the motor. There's one of them right there on this end, closest to the commutator. So we're going to put those over here and keep those in the proper order. The motor has to be balanced on both sides in order to have it spin properly. Make sure we don't have any other washers in there. Hopefully this will come out now easily enough. Although you never know, right? You never know. The tolerance on these wires is really snug on this particular motor. It normally doesn't fit that quite that snug. We'll take it apart on this end over here. Give us a little bit more room to work with, hopefully. This is probably why a lot of people are hesitant to work on their own motors, because it's a little tricky. It's a little bit tricky, especially when you're trying to pull it apart like this. There we go. And I'd love to say that I made that look easy, but I really didn't, did I? I made it look kind of awkward. So you can see we have a washer on this end as well. You want to be real careful when you're handling one of these, because these washers can drop off. And then all of a sudden you're going to put the motor back together. It's not going to spin up freely and evenly. Now, when you're cleaning this commutator, you want to be real careful because this is a soft metal. It's made out of copper. And so you don't want to use anything overly abrasive. The quickest way to clean it up is to use a Dremel type tool with a polishing brush. And then what I do is I put a little bit of kerosene on here so that it doesn't create too much heat and warp this copper. So I'm going to put that on there first. We'll let that kind of do its magic. Grab my little Dremel. And you can certainly use dental tools. I've demonstrated before using dental tools to clean this up as well. But for the sake of this live stream, it's a little bit more expeditious to do it this way. And just turn your Dremel on real low. the lowest setting. And then what we do is we just gently buffer it like this from side to side. Don't go like this from end to end, because you might nick one of these wires that comes off of here and feeds into the stack lamentations, and you'll be in a major world of hurt. These are real thin wires if you look at them. And believe it or not, even a polishing brush is able to cut through one of these if you hit it with enough force. So we go from side to side like this as we're polishing it. Yeah, just take it real slow. It's a lot easier to do this with it out of the motor than trying to do it with it in the motor. Let's do an initial wipe of this off to see how clean we've gotten it. You can just use a Q-tip, and I use this solution. It's a combination of a cleaning agent that doesn't leave a residue, and then I also add a little bit of rubbing alcohol to it as well. And what it does is it does a really good job of stripping this stuff off. We just have to see how much of it we've gotten off already and how much further we need to go. You see what we've already gotten off of there if you look at that Q-tip swab. And this might be the core reason that we're not getting a good response from this motor, is someone may have either lubricated the machine with an inappropriate type oil, and then it works its way into that motor area with that electrical field, and it ends up contaminating this critical surface that's a part of the motor. Again, this is the commutator that those motor brushes run over. And already we're starting to get a lot of that beauty back to that commutator. A little bit more cleaning on it. We want to get it really, really nice and clean. And as I showed you in another live stream, as you're using a polishing brush like this on a Dremel tool, you want to make sure you're also doing proper maintenance on this as well. And that means that periodically you're going to be cleaning this brush that you're polishing with as well, because it'll pick up all the contaminants off of that commutator and they'll stay on there. They'll stay on there and they'll continue to recontaminate that surface that we're trying to get clean. So periodically you do a little bit of maintenance on your polishing brush as well. And when you wipe this off, say with a towel like this, this is a microfiber cloth. When you wipe this off, you want to be bringing it outward like this. Don't go from side to side like this, like we're using the Dremel tool. You'll go like this direction with it so that you're not pressing against these this commutator. These are individual little panels. And if somehow this cloth catches a rough edge of this, you could actually damage this surface. So don't go like this, go like this, drawing it out. And as I'm rotating it, I'm lifting this up so that this the stack lamentations aren't catching on this little carpet area that I've got here. You see all the stuff we're getting off of this commutator, and it might be a really good indication of why we're getting issues with this motor not firing up properly. So again, we're kind of looking at this now and just doing a general inspection. The wires coming off the commutator to the stack lamentations, we're not seeing any breaks in them. We're not seeing any raw edges. They appear to be in good working condition. Stack lamentations as well look like they're in generally good condition. And these hash marks in here that are on this particular panel of the stack lamentation, these are actually engineered into this motor. This is not damage on this one here. So that's appropriate to see that. We can also do a general polishing of the stack lamentations from the outside as well, because I do see some buildup on those also. And as this is spinning inside of the electrical motor, inside of that housing, the electricity is going to be trying to run through these as well. So we want to make sure that those are in good working condition also. And again, I'm kind of keeping my hands on both sides so I don't lose those washers. I've got one more washer to put back on there when we're done. So we're going to do a general polishing of the stack lamentations also. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on there. My brush will pick it up, and we won't have to oil all those panels. And on the stack lamentations, you want to go from front to back like this when you're doing them. You see already the beauty of that coming back to life. You see how they look like they were generally pretty. They look like they were generally pretty clean, and you all of a sudden realize how filthy they are. I'm doing every single panel of the stack lamentations. And some of these marks on the metal there, it's not going to come out. It's embedded in there real deep, and we try to buff it too much, it'll generate too much heat, and we could actually damage the stack lamentations. So we're just going to get them as tidied up as we can, get them nice and clean. Gently wipe over them with the microfiber. Now, where we were working them like this with the Dremel tool, when you wipe them off, you want to gently wipe like this. Just gently touch each of those panels to get that residue off that we created using that kerosene and also that Dremel tool. Just get them wiped off nice and tidy, nice and clean. Again, if any one of these areas is not optimized, it will create issues with that motor being able to fire up and run correctly. You can see our cloth there, just going over those stack lamentations. So this is what I'm showing you today in this live stream. We're trying to troubleshoot the key areas of the motor very quickly, and then we're going to be putting this motor back together to see if we can get it to fire up. If I were doing this as a complete motor service, it would take much longer than what we're doing in this live stream today. There's a lot more areas that I inspect, a lot more areas that I clean, including these edges of the stack lamentations as well. But we're just trying to do a real quick cleanup on this motor to see if that will allow this motor to fire up properly. Again, when we did a pre-test of it, we didn't get any response from it whatsoever. And we verified the size of the brushes, the return tension of the springs and everything. And all of that seemed to be fine. So the other thing I'm going to look at is the output pulley itself, the shaft that comes to that output pulley. I can see that there's a fair amount of buildup on there as well. And as this tries to spin, this could be creating drag, even though I tested turning it and it seemed to turn okay. We'll do a little bit of cleanup and polishing on this as well. And in order to do that, I'm going to carefully take off these small little washers that are part of that spacing process to allow the motor to spin properly. Yeah, I think we'll carefully use the Dremel on this as well. You can see what we've gotten off of that already. We'll just do a little bit of cleanup on here. And again, if we were doing a complete motor service, it usually takes about 2 hours. So obviously I'm not covering all of the points that I would normally cover, but we should be able to do enough to this this motor to get it fired up. I'm hoping. All right, so we got that cleaned up nicely. And again, you never want to use any oil inside of the motor or apply motor oil or apply oil from the outside into the motor. There's going to be lubrication points on these featherweight motors. But before you reassemble it, you do want to put a little bit of kerosene using a Q-tip swab on this output shaft, because this is a major spin-up area for the machine, and we want to reduce drag as much as possible. Just putting a little bit of kerosene on there. And kerosene has a very high flash point, which is why they used to, back in the day, they used to service motors, electrical motors, regularly, strictly with kerosene. It's because you can put it on the motor and you can clean the motor with it. We could even use it on the stack lamentations and on the commutator, and it's not going to create an electrical hazard or a fire hazard for the motor. We also want to clean these two little washers as well. There's actually 2 washers on the output end of this shaft. So we'll just swab those as well with kerosene, just to kind of tidy them up a little bit. And also to make sure that as they're making a connection with the inside housing, that there's not going to be a drag factor with them. And normally I would polish these, and I would also go over them with the dental tools. But again, we're just going to do a quick once over on this, and then I'll do a complete servicing of this motor following this live stream. So you're not getting the full grand tour, unfortunately. So again, on this part of the assembly, we've got 2 spacer washers. I'm going to go ahead and put this one back on as well. And it's really critical that you get them on, you get it right, because if you end up putting, say, 2 spacers on this end near the commutator, it's going to throw off the balance of this as it's spinning. You're going to have performance issues, and it also might bind on you as well. So now we have to grab that other little washer that we had off to the side. We want to do the same thing with that and clean that one up as well. And then I'll look at this other part of the output pulley shaft on this side and just see whether or not we need to do any polishing on that. Yeah, I would say so. We got a bunch of buildup right here. Again, I would go into this a lot deeper in a regular motor service We'll just polish it up a little bit to get some of that extra debris off of there. So all in all, I'm very satisfied with what we've done to this, and this is going to be the most critical point. The only other thing we want to do to the motor before we see if we can get it to fire up, what I would do in a full motor treatment is I would also do a bunch of service to these opposing lamentations as well. You got the inside, excuse me, you have the outside, you got the inside as well. These also have to be thoroughly cleaned up as well. For this particular live stream, we're not going to do that because it's, like I said, it takes me about 2 hours, maybe even a little bit longer. So, and we also have opposing copper contacts on the inside of here that these stack lamentations interact with as it's spinning. Those should also be cleaned up as well. What I'll do is I'll do a quick swabbing on them, but again, I'm not going as deep as I would on a full motor treatment. We're just going to do this real quick to see if we can get this motor to work. And then I'll go ahead and do a more thorough job before this is returned to the customer. We're just kind of swabbing that inside. You can't see there's opposing copper contacts. If you kind of look in, you can kind of catch a glimpse of them on either side of these opposing stack lamentations. We're going to also swab those off real quick as well. Look at what we got off with little or no effort. So it gives you an idea of the condition of this motor and why maybe we're not getting a good response. Actually, we're not getting any response from it right now when we tested it. So we'll see if we can improve those odds a little bit by going through here and cleaning up some of these key areas. And then I'll circle back and I'll do a thorough motor treatment of this customer's machine. So with little or no effort, this is what we just got off of those copper contacts that are adjacent to those opposing stack lamentations. It looks like something that Osman wrote has been flagged. If one of you moderators want to take a peek at that and see whether or not it is something you want to approve for it to be displayed. Right now, it is being held, something that Osman just wrote. So you'll want to check that out if you could. One of you moderators can look at that. And if you want to approve it, then you just click on show versus hide. Okay, so I'm going to work carefully to thread this back in now. Again, you know what? The other thing I'll do real quick, and again, I'm giving you a nickel tour of the motor. I'm not giving you the thorough tour. Is when this shaft is reinserted into this part of the housing, it's going to have to spin within a copper sleeve, and I'm not going to clean that thoroughly, but I am going to put just a little bit of kerosene on the inside of this right over here, because if it's creating a lot of drag and a lot of resistance, it's not going to spin up true when we put it back together. And when you reinsert it, make sure you kind of keep it pitched up a little bit so you don't lose these washers in the process. It's a little bit tricky. So we're going to work real carefully to try to thread this back through now. Easier said than done. Let me open that up just a little bit more. open that up just a little bit more if I can. It's really, the wiring is a little bit short on these stators. It's usually not quite this snug, but it is on this instance. So again, watch those washers so you don't lose them or they don't slide off on you. I'm going to try to get this back into the housing. Get that output pulley going through that sleeve that's made out of a copper material, just like the commutator. Okay, we got that back into place. And I'm just checking to make sure we don't have any binding at this point. So I'm turning the output shaft right here and just seeing how that, you can see that commutator turning adjacent to it, or in concert with it, I should say. And I didn't see if it was Susie or Emma who approved Osman's comment. It's kind of odd sometimes the way YouTube works and what they flag, but it's there as a precaution. And it's great to have moderators that can jump in and say, yeah, there's no problem with that. That looks fine. And the same thing on this other end. You can't see it in the shot right now, but on the other end, we've got another port that we have to add just a little bit of lubricant to, a little bit of kerosene on this end. So when we put that other end of the output shaft in, it's going to turn freely. And I just want to make sure we still have our spacer. We still have our washer on there. We do. Make sure we haven't lost that. It's so easy when you're putting motor housing back together to tilt it a little bit to try to get a better vantage point. And then all of a sudden you'll lose one of those washers. You'll put the motor housing back together and it won't be turning properly. And you're like, what the heck's going on? It should be working. And it's not. So really watch those washers carefully as you're putting the motor back together. As we're reassembling it, you notice these two wires that are connected to those ports that have those carbon brushes, and then it runs over the commutator. As you're putting it back together, make sure that these wires are not getting snagged in there and you're putting excessive stress on them. Otherwise, you could get a break in them, or you could get them rubbing against the commutator. So you want to kind of reach in there with your finger, kind of bring them apart real gently a little bit, kind of bring them apart like that. So when we bring that back together, we're going to get a nice clean fit on that motor, hopefully. There we go. So we've carefully snapped it back together. Now I'm checking again to see if that output pulley is turning freely. That output pulley shaft that is going to be powering that belt for this featherweight. And it's turning very nicely now that we've done even just a high level of cleaning on it. If I grab it like this and kind of give it a little bit of a spin, you'll see that it doesn't stop right away, but it spins a little bit further than it normally would. Let's see if I can do it like this. See that? That's telling us that we've got a really good motor now, at least as far as it not binding. It's turning very freely. So now we need to put those bolts back in. And again, when we put the bolts back in, we got to be really careful that we don't over tighten them. We don't want to over tighten them and create an issue with binding. And I do it kind of like when you're putting tires on a car. I don't snug one side down all the way. I kind of get it going. I get it threaded in there so that it's fairly well in there, and I get the other one in there, and then we kind of balance them as we're tightening them down so that the force is even on the housing, joining these two pieces back together again. And sometimes as you're turning it, you might have to wiggle this housing a little bit so that it's threaded in there to the opposing side properly. And this is, again, you don't want to use an electric screwdriver to tighten these. You could probably use it to loosen them without any issue, but I always just prefer to do it the old manual way. So now that we've tightened those up again, I want to check that again to make sure that our output shaft is turning freely. And it's turning very, very nicely. Now what I do, and again, I gave you kind of the nickel tour of the motor. There's so much more I do to the motor, but I also put a little drop of kerosene on the outside of this as well. We did it from the inside out, and now we're going to do it from the outside in. Just put a little drop, let it run down there a little bit, and then work that shaft back and forth. So we're getting a nice, even, easy spin from that output shaft. Now the motor on these featherweight motors has one lubrication point right here. You can see that right there. Again, you could get away with putting kerosene in there because that's an appropriate type agent for a motor. But better than that and more lasting than that is using an appropriate motor grease. They do offer Singer grease still today. You can use that, or I use my pink grease. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my pink grease real quick and put just a little bit of grease inside of there. And there's one on the opposite side as well. You can see right here, it's on the back. So we have one that's up top here for this output shaft. And then we have one right over here for this other end of the output shaft that's closest to the commutator. So we're going to add a little bit of grease to that as well. Let me just grab a wipe off the excess. Now, the other thing we have to do real quick is we're going to use Q-tip swabs before we, and I'll actually clean these brushes as well, the motor brushes. We're going to clean this copper sleeve as well that these motor brushes go into. It will allow them to move down and to be consumed by the commutator more evenly without any debris in there. But it's also going to get any excessive carbon or other junk out of those sleeves as well, because that's part of the electrical field. So I'm going to put a little bit of this cleaning solution that includes, it also has some rubbing alcohol mixed into it. And we're going to actually swab each end of these copper sleeves that go down to the commutator. Kind of just apply pressure in different directions, get that copper sleeve nice and clean, nice and clean. Not too bad, not too bad. We got some off of there, you can see that. Turn it over and we'll do the other side. This one's a little bit worse off. You can see that one, all the debris that we got off of that. Okay, the final thing we need to do before we try testing this motor again is we are going to service these motor brushes as well. If you didn't know it, even though these motor brushes look just fine and dandy, we still need to make sure that they have any excessive carbon cleaned off of them. There's a nice, clean, even, smooth surface on the end. Right here on the end, on the bottom, that's going to be making contact with the commutator. It needs to be able to be contoured and meet up with that commutator without any rough edges or anything like that. So we need to make sure that these edges are nice and smooth and nice and clean. So I'm going to go ahead and just gently go over them with the rotary tool and make sure that they're tidied up real nicely. Kind of doing that off camera. I should do that on camera for you. So on the bottom, you just want to, not a lot of pressure, just kind of gently go over the part that's going to be making contact with the commutator. Make sure that that's nice and tidy and that it's even across. You don't want to have one edge higher than the other. It needs to fit and contour to that commutator very nicely. That one appears to be in good shape now. Go over this one as well. I'm actually going to put my magnifiers on so I can see that up close a little bit more. I've got my regular glasses on right now. And this is such an essential part. And again, I'm doing a real light touch on this, real light. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take some of that cleaning solution that includes some, I'll actually get rid of these two. These two we've already used. Take some of this with some of that cleaning solution that also has some rubbing alcohol in it. And we'll go over these motor brushes on all edges. Just going to do a light little swipe on each side of the carbon stack. And the reason that I use this solution that has rubbing alcohol included with it is the moisture wicks off very quickly. We don't want to have excessive residue on here that's going to impair these brushes in doing their job. Do the same thing with the other one. Just do a thorough inspection of that. And these springs, every spring is different. A lot of the replacement springs are going to have a more rigid metal. These are real flexible. And I think that they have enough return pressure, but I'm just going to gently expand them just slightly. And again, the reason that you do that is over time they get compressed. And it's essential that this is pushing down with enough force to feed that carbon stack into that commutator. And I think it was adequate, but I just wanted to give it just a little bit more of a boost. We'll do the same thing with this one. Just expand it slightly. And again, whoops, that's really springy now. These springs on here are also made out of copper, and ideally you'd want to also clean these up as well. Again, I'm giving you kind of the nickel tour on this live stream today. A complete motor treatment would take much, much, much more time. But we're just trying to see if we can get this motor to work. And then I can fine tune it more. But you can also clean over these brushes as well. The spring itself, I should say. Because again, the electricity runs through here, and we don't want to have anything impair it. Okay, so I think we've got it to a point where we should be able to put those motor brushes back in now and try doing a test on this motor again to see if it fires up. Hopefully we've been successful. All right, so let's get these brushes reinserted. And where's my caps? Looking for my caps now. And again, even these caps that make contact with the motor brushes, they also should be serviced as well. Because if you reintroduce dirt or contaminants to a field that we just did a high level cleaning on, again, we didn't do a thorough cleaning of it, but we did a fairly decent cleaning on this. If we're reintroducing dirt and contaminants, it's just going to muddy up things again and put us in a situation where the motor may not respond. All right, we'll turn it over and we'll get that other brush inserted. It's feeling a little bit weak still. I'm just going to expand it a little bit more. Give me an idea of how dirty these motors get, though. Look at my hands. And we didn't even do a thorough deep cleaning, complete service of this motor. And you can just see all of the junk. Again, motors act like a vacuum cleaner. So they end up sucking in anything that's in the environment. If you have your sewing machine set up near the kitchen and you're cooking bacon, or you're cooking something else, it kicks out a lot of smoke or grease. Your motor is potentially going to suck that in. All right, so keep your fingers crossed. Again, we didn't do as thorough of a job on this as I would like, but hopefully we did enough to address those primary areas of the motor that may have been experiencing troubles. I'm going to give us a try again, and hopefully we get success. So I'm going to get our alligator clips out again. We'll see if we can do a quick bypass on this. Now, all of you watching right now, it doesn't look like you've done much in the live chat for a while. Who thinks or who hopes that the motor works? Anyone that's watching right now, you think we're going to get a motor that works now, or do you think the motor is still going to be dead after we went through and did a quick cleaning of the motor to try to get it tidied up a little bit better? What do you guys think? You guys didn't fall asleep, did you? Are we still live? I think we're still live. Everybody's in a Saturday slump right now, and they're okay. Candido Rivera is saying success. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. And again, the reason I've got this little bottle that's glass in between here is we don't want these two contacts to make contact. So, all right, let's move it right about there. I think that'll be pretty good. All right, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. And that is how it's done, folks. Yeah, baby. So we took a motor that was dead and we gave it life again. Now it doesn't have optimal life because I didn't do my thorough service of this motor. Again, my motor treatment, if someone sends their machine in, part of that service that I do for the machine automatically is tearing a motor apart like we did, but spending a lot more time of detailed cleaning and optimization, making sure that that motor is running absolutely tip top, just like this one was when we tested it initially. So once I get done with this motor for real, it's going to run even better and stronger and faster than it did in this initial test after we got done servicing, doing a high level service of it. So I hope that you found this helpful. I hope it gives you a little bit more confidence that if you've got a motor that is not working, or you have a motor that is underperforming, you plug it in and it just doesn't spin up as strong as it should. It's going to give you the confidence to sit down with that motor and to take it apart for your featherweight and to get it running at a much higher level. Now we've got a motor. I would say that this motor, even with that light, high level service that we did of it, this motor is probably actually running stronger than the other one now. And there was no major issues with this motor at all. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. And next week, I plan on presenting the machine that Adam sent from London, England. It's on the other workbench right now. And it's going to be put under the bright lights before I end up shipping that machine back to Adam. That, again, is a Swedish beauty that's on the other workbench right now. As a matter of fact, I'll spin the camera around and just show you real quick. You can see Adam's machine over there on the other workbench. So that machine will be presented this week at some point. Probably Tuesday morning is when we've generally been doing them. And that'll give you an opportunity to see that London, England machine operating. And it's going to be operating. I was talking about the different motors, how they're set up for different environments from a standpoint of voltage. These two motors are set up for the US 110 to 125. The motor that's on Adam's machine is set up for 220 to 250. So in that live stream this week, you'll see me using this step-up converter over here. You can kind of catch a little bit of a glimpse of it right over there. I'll be using that step-up converter so that I can take our 110, 125 voltage and bring it all the way up to 250 through that little box. And if someone like my friend Heidi from Switzerland, remember she bought a FOF 332 from me, she's using a similar step-up converter, but over there, she's got it set up to step down the voltage. So converters like this will either step it up to give us 250 in the US, or they can step down the voltage in the European marketplace to take it from 250 down to 110 if they're working with a US machine over there like Heidi is in Switzerland with that 332 that I prepared for her to sew shoes in the Swiss Alps. I'm not making that up. I actually did an interview with her, and she talks about how she's going to be using that machine over in the Swiss Alps. And again, the machine that I prepared for her has a US motor, so she's using a step down converter to bring that voltage from 250 all the way down to 110. With Adam's machine, we'll be doing the opposite. We'll be stepping up the voltage from 110, 125 all the way up to 250. So you won't want to miss that live stream this week. It'll be really interesting as you see us operating a machine in a totally different voltage bracket for Adam's machine that's going to be heading back to London, England. Yeah. So at any rate, it's great. Now we have a motor that's in great shape. Well, in good shape. We have a motor that's in good shape, and I'll get it in great shape before it goes back to the customer. I'm just curious real quick before we wrap this live stream up. Just curious real quick. Put these motors side by side. The one on the left is the one that we just tore apart. This is the one we just tore apart. This is the one that we tested first. Just curious to see how they sound side by side. If we do a bypass, we'll fire the one that we just serviced up first. There we go. That's a better shot. We'll fire this one up first, and then we'll fire this one up second to see which one sounds stronger or if they sound equally strong. I'm just curious to see what we get. All right, we'll do this one first. And I'll let all of you be the judge. Again, we didn't do a complete service of this motor. We didn't do a complete service. We did a kind of a high-level service of it. We'll see how it compares to this one that's gotten a more detailed servicing in the workshop. Shut the heater off again so we can have real quiet workshop. So this is the one again that started out dead. We did a high-level servicing of it. Let's see how it sounds again now. That's a real strong motor now. And we haven't even done a complete service on it yet. Wow. Wow. See that? That's only 0.4 amps. But even with the high level service that we did on this, already it's starting to come up and just bark into action. It's starting to bark into action. So let me move the one we just brought back to life to the back now. And let's bring this other one out here. I'm just curious to see how it sounds in comparison, because this one has gotten a little bit more of a detailed service than the one that was dead. Let's see how it sounds. Amazing the difference. And that's why I always say servicing is so important. And the thing that I want to point out is we haven't even serviced the foot controller for this machine yet, either one of these. And that's also equally important, that you do a thorough servicing of those foot controllers, especially the ones that go with the featherweights, because they're a Bakelite style one. And there's a lot of service points on those foot controllers, including the carbon stacks that are inside of those foot controllers. There's about 50 paper thin carbon wafers in two towering stacks inside of those foot controllers that also have to be taken out periodically, and all of the excess carbon dust has to be cleaned off of them very, very gently so that they perform at peak performance, and they also don't have a tendency to overheat. If you didn't know it, if you never heard that before, inside of foot controllers like this, there's two copper sleeves filled with paper thin wafer style carbon discs. There's basically 50 and 50, and periodically you have to take those out and very, very gently clean those carbon stack wafers off so that they don't build up excessive heat, especially if you're doing a lot of slow sewing. Slow sewing will allow that electricity to build up in Bakelite style foot controllers like this one that go with the featherweight, and it'll cause these to get super hot. And by doing that servicing, that deep servicing that I do on machines like this when they come in the workshop, it gets that excess carbon dust off of there, and it allows them to operate even at slower speeds much cooler than they would otherwise. So if you didn't know that about the Bakelite foot controllers, put a smiley face or a thumbs up in the live chat if you would, because I love when we can share information back and forth and we learn something new. Don't you love that too? I hope you do. All right, so let's test this one now that really didn't have any major issues with it. I'll kind of flip it over like this so you can see that pulley spin up a little bit more easily. All right, make sure they don't make contact. We don't want to make any sparks today. Okay, so now we're going to test this one and see how it does comparatively from a power standpoint. I'll be honest with you, and I don't know what you can hear in the live stream or not, but this one actually has a little bit less power than the one that we just brought back to life. This one fires up at even a higher RPM, and all we did was a high level service of it. So you can imagine how well this motor that was dead is going to run once I tear it apart again after this live stream, and I spend about an hour and a half longer in doing all the other servicing that it requires on the inside. This thing is just going to be a monster. It's going to be a mini monster, rated only at 0.4 amps. But when I get done with this little motor, it's going to put out more output than a lot of the bigger Singer motors, like on the 201s and other machines like that have not been optimized. And right now, even after that light level of servicing that we did to this motor, it actually is revving up higher than this motor over here. So that says a lot about the process, doesn't it? That says a lot. Cool. All right. Well, and thank you to all of our friends that are in the live chat that are giving feedback. I love getting feedback from all of you because it reinforces that I'm doing a good job of delivering the message that, if you're comfortable doing it, you can revolutionize the performance of your machine by going through a featherweight motor like either one of these and giving them, even a high level service like we did today on this live stream is going to revolutionize what that motor is capable of doing. There's so many things inside of these little motors to hold them back. And when we go through and we start to touch those points that are so essential to the motor, we can all of a sudden take that little 0.4 amp motor and we can make it a beast when it comes to power output. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something new. I hope you are encouraged by it to potentially try doing this to your featherweight motor. I've talked to a couple of friends that have gone to seminars that are put on by a real sweet lady. And I don't remember what her name is, but she's a real sweet gal. Oh, and good morning to Rebecca. Good morning to Becky. I think that's Becky. Yeah, I think that's Becky, the second one up in the live chat right now. So good morning to Becky as well. I believe Becky, aren't you from Minnesota, if I remember correctly? And Becky actually has a machine in the workshop right now. I might be getting my names wrong. I look at the screen names not nearly as much as the moderators. Yeah, I got that one right. Hey, all right, yay! Scout got one right. So, but it's encouraging when we can take something like this motor back here that wouldn't even turn over, would not even fire up. It was dead. And through just some general high-level servicing, we can all of a sudden bring it back to life again. You can do the same thing. Yes, there's workshop magic here, but in the end, all of you are so incredibly smart. And also many of you venture out there regularly and try new things with your machines to try to make them perform better. This is just a new opportunity for you to consider if you have a featherweight, or again, this applies to any motor, any electric Singer motor. You can very carefully open them up. Again, just be real mindful of those wires that run between the stator and the copper the copper stacks that hold those motor brushes. Just be real mindful that you, as you saw me doing this live stream today, as you're separating those halves, just be really, really gentle, because there's only solder points that hold those on, and you don't want to break one of those off, or it just makes it a lot more difficult, doesn't it? So, at any rate, exciting stuff. This is our motor that was working. I'm going to, real quick before we wrap up this live stream, we're going to get our dead motor back up there. Set this one over here. Bring this one back out. You go over there, stay there. This is our motor that was dead. And again, listen to this motor rev up to life after we just did those simple little things to it that we did in this live stream. The same things you could try to do on your featherweight motor. Oh, what I was going to say before, and I totally lost my train of thought. There's a real sweet gal that goes around the country. I think she spends a lot of time in Texas. And she does seminars for folks on how to service featherweights. And I asked a couple of folks that went to the seminar, actually attended it, does she cover the motor aspect of the featherweight? And they said, no, she does not. So to my friend that goes around the country, and I think they said she's in her 70s or 80s. I don't remember what her name is. But to that real sweet gal that goes around trying to help people enjoy their featherweights at a higher level and become more intimate with their featherweights and learning how to service a lot of the key points on the featherweight. Now you can package her seminar that apparently costs about 150 bucks. I think it's around $150 that she charges to go in there and to show basics of servicing the featherweight mechanically, etc. Now you can marry her seminar with a free live stream on how to better optimize a featherweight motor. Yeah. So let's see how we did again. Let's see how we did on this motor that was dead and see whether or not it's just as strong and just as vibrant as it was a few seconds ago. Oops, my electrical pulled out. We need electric to test it. Folks, that sounds like a jet airplane. That sounds like a jet airplane. Are you kidding me? Yeah! Well, that's all I have to show you guys today. That's all I have to show you. I had planned to do something else with my Saturday, but I thought, doggone it, I've gotten this featherweight into the workshop. It's got this motor issue. I'm hoping that I can troubleshoot it and also teach all of my friends at the same time how if they experience a similar issue and maybe your featherweight motor fires up, but it doesn't seem like it has as much strength as this one that we just did a general servicing on. Now you know how to carefully separate those two halves. And again, hopefully you don't have to have as much trouble as I did in trying to get that motor pulley off. You can take your motor pulley off, gently take those two halves apart, do that high servicing like you saw in this live stream, and then watch and see how your featherweight motor performs then. It is going to be a beast. It's going to be a power beast. Absolutely. So God bless you guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And please, please, please share this live stream with other folks. Share this live stream with other folks that you know have featherweights to try to encourage them to take that additional step of trying to make their featherweight amazing, to try to make their featherweight amazing. And the last person in the live chat that just gave a thumbs up, Susie from Minnesota, just like Becky's from Minnesota, we have Susie from Minnesota that has that little wrench next to her name. I want to acknowledge her right now because Susie wrote a beautiful creative piece for the last contest giveaway that I did, where there was going to be one grand prize winner that got a featherweight from the workshop. I ended up pulling, if you didn't see that, check it out. I ended up pulling an Oprah where I said to each one of those people that entered the contest, you get a featherweight, you get a featherweight, you get a featherweight. And Susie is one of those that's going to be a recipient of a featherweight from the workshop. So I'm going to be giving away 3 featherweights instead of only 1. So congratulations again to Susie. And I didn't see if there's others in the live chat that are also ones that entered that contest. I'm not sure. But I'm going to end up giving 3 away as a belated Christmas present. So that's really cool. All right, everybody, you take care. I'll put on, I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it or not with my audio until I buy that really expensive mixer thing that Razer wants to sell me. So we'll see. We'll see if you can hear any holiday music, hopefully. All right, take care, everybody. God bless. All right, here we go. This one here. This one here. This over here. This back over there. That over there. That over there. There we go. Ha ha. Yes. Well, everybody have a great weekend. I also see that Christine, one of my leadership team members, joined as well. Christine, it sounds like that cough is persistent, but hopefully you're feeling stronger. You're feeling more like yourself, and you're getting back on your feet again. I know it's horrible to be sick, especially around the holiday times. So God bless everybody. Just wanted to show you it's actually me. It's actually me. And thanks again to all of you joining. I hope you found this helpful as we were troubleshooting these motors, and we were able to bring that one that was dead back to life again. It's always good to have a motor that's running well. And once I get done doing a thorough service of these two motors, they are going to be a beast. They're going to be a beast. So take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. God bless. And again, watch for that live stream this week where we'll be sewing on Adam's machine that came all the way from London, England. London, England. That's fun. Yeah. Take care.